The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was really created through the whole process of Title VII. It's the one that actually manages it. So with that, we've added a couple of other areas, but on the aspect of racism, if we go back in history, the very original document in 1964, the very first one called the Civil Rights Act, it really focused in on discrimination, especially in the area of blacks in the workplace and employment. So let's focus in on the actual core and the origins of this and look as to what the EEOC really focused in on. If you look at today's population balance, on racial balance, we have 59.7% white, Hispanic or Latino, 18.9%, Black or African American, 12.6%, Asian, 6.1%, other races, 2.7%. Now, these numbers, sometimes I've seen data a little bit different in the aspect of a couple of these, but for the most part, this is relatively accurate. If you look on the projections as to what the world's going to be like, the white aspect, the population, is going to actually shrink overall in perspective when it comes to a portion of the population by over 11%. We're looking at about 47.8%, which is the total shift that we have. Hispanic or Latino, you're looking at an increase in 9.7%. Black or African American, 0.5%, up to 13%. Asian is going to go up 3 points to 9%, and other races 1.2%, which is actually an overall decline. You have a couple outliers here. You're looking at, we have a large population that technically qualifies as white in the aspect of you have the Middle East. They don't really fit in the other categories here, so they're all lumped in with the white population. You also have India, which for some reason India is actually classified as Asian, and I know technically they fit that way on a landmass, but their culture is so different from the other Asian races. I'm always puzzled as to why it's lumped in that way. So you'll see a whole series of different aspects here. As accurate or inaccurate this may be, this is the racial balance that we're going to see. What I'm looking at, just in this chart alone, I'm going to see a major shift from the white population and a major increase in the Latino population as well. Now, that said, I just use common sense here. This is about business. If you're in business, okay, and you have a large Latino population and an awful lot of them speak English and Spanish, it would occur to me that maybe if I want to sit down there and grab market share for the year 2050, I would be hiring more people that speak dual languages, that speak English and Spanish. That makes sense? If you're running a business, okay, the aspect of being racist or anything else, that should go out the door. You focus in on how you make money. This is a business class. Let's talk about how you make money. Pay attention to the demographics. There's big changes here. Discrimination is illegal, but also taking advantage of change in population stuff is a smart business move. Here's a couple of the present day cases. I know that a lot of people, they focus in on, once upon a time we had these laws. Yes, we did. Once upon a time we had this. I want to look at today. In the last 10 years, there's 3 major cases that come forward when it comes down to race cases. Fisher versus University of Texas, it really was an affirmative action, admissions policy. The Supreme Court held up the policy, allowing race to be considered one factor in the admission process to promote diversities. You also have a similar decision. This is 2016. You have another one in 2023 where Harvard had something similar, and they really were sued on discrimination based upon Asian American applicants. The court ruled in favor of Harvard, saying its admission policies were consistent with previous rulings on affirmative action. You'll see affirmative action is there as well. 2020, this is a significant case. It expanded existing rights. If you go back by the original 1964 Civil Rights Act, it talks about sex. Well, the original language in the day of that time was referring to sex between male and female. This decision by the current Supreme Court justices is out there. It was a case about gay marriage, and they included the marriage of 2 people of the same sex to be covered underneath the word sex. So they moved the word sex. They altered the definition that was in use for over 50 years, almost 50 years, into something and added it into it, same-sex unions. Okay, so you have that aspect of it. That is a huge case that really changed the entire landscape of the United States. So all three of these you're seeing when it comes down to race cases, what's out there, they're huge. Here are some of the historic cases that we always will go back. Once upon a time, we had some ugly things in our society that by today's standard, we look back and say, how could that have happened? Brown versus the Board of Education really outlawed segregated schools. Sometimes you had a white school and sometimes you had a black school. I don't know how we did that. How could you sit down and read the Declaration of Independence and have that happen? I don't know. To me, I found that appalling that we would treat people differently, because for me, it's an inheld belief that all of us are created by one creator. And with that being said, why would I want to treat somebody differently who's underneath the same creator? Because I have to face that person someday. Anyway, so that being said, that's my perspective. The Civil Rights Act in 1964, the Voting Rights Act in 1965, they're all crucial milestones. Voting Rights Act protects by the Supreme Court in 2013. You also have a whole series of race-based incidents that some of us in our nation have gone through. It is wrong from a philosophical perspective. It is wrong from a personal perspective, at least from my personal perspective. But most importantly, for the part of this class, it is wrong for the legal perspective, which is what we're talking about. From a legal perspective, our body of law that outlaws discrimination has gotten larger, stronger over the years. We've added jury trials in the prospect as well. We have the EEOC, for good or bad, is on the case to sit down and make this happen. And hopefully the doors are opening more than they have historically. And I'm still concerned looking at data that does suggest possibly we still have issues of hiring problems, and hopefully we can overcome that in the next generation. And hopefully the next generation, you'll do a better job than mine did. Putting it together, we need to monitor for equal access and opportunity. It's never before been considered a corporate responsibility. We're seeing more doors opening up in the aspect of it being corporate responsibility. Corporations, they've gone through an evolution of focusing exclusively on profit to all of a sudden becoming involved in political content. Now we've seen a swing back, but hopefully we'll always continue to hold on to the fact that we have an obligation to focus in on making certain we're employing people that look like our customers. And if you're living in a demographic area with a multinational base, multiracial base, pay attention to everybody in your base. Neither employee appraisals nor total compensations are usually monitored for bias. That should be looked at. And then more recent attention, state statutes, all kinds of different progress, and also employer liability aspects of it. Title VII was enacted primarily as discrimination against African Americans or blacks in our country, but the act applies to all. McDonald versus Santa Fe Transportation, another bus case. Could you believe that? Okay, so you have racial discrimination by any group prohibited by Title VII. So pay attention as to where we are as to what discrimination is about. All races are covered, and it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your background. This is the United States. We have a reputation for being a melting pot. By melting pot, it means our doors are open and that we don't practice discrimination, and especially in the world of employment. All claims, just because somebody's feelings are hurt, doesn't mean that discrimination took place. You have to support things with evidence and focus in on the preventive systems in place to work consistently and have different aspects of it. I've worked for years in the aspect of doing co-presentations with the EEOC. Now, that said, I had motivations behind it. Number one, I wanted to make certain I brought them in on a regular basis. I also wanted to have an EEOC investigator talking side by side with me, because in fact, if I ever had my institution got called in for any kind of discrimination complaints, I would have a relationship in the process over here. You know, the EEOC, they're just trying to do their job, and this is the big deal. They have to confront the aspect of discrimination, not just in racism, an entire body of aspects, because this is a country where freedom should be paramount on all of our minds. And that is a phenomenal privilege. We have a lot of people want to come here. Okay, and so we have with that, they want to come here because we have a cool system. This nation, yes, we have lots of problems. But man, go around and take a look around the rest of the planet. We have a lot of good things going for us. Racism, it's still an issue, expanded now to different races. The population is shifting, and so enforcement, racial claims must be supported by evidence. These 3 bullet points for this section over here, I want you to have in your notes because this is a big deal, because discrimination in the United States in the area of employment is illegal. Take care.